very warm good evening to one and all present here. I, Aditi Singh Chandel, on behalf of the entire IDG family, welcome you to its 119th session. It is an absolute honor to have with us Ms. Medha Patkar ma'am, a renowned social activist and founder of Narmada Bachao Andolan. Thank you so much, ma'am, for agreeing to have a session with us today. The moderator for today's session is Ms. Toshita Jha, one of the co-conveners of IDG. I would request Toshita to take over. Thank you.
Good evening, ma'am. I would just like to say that it's an absolute honor for you, for us to have you here, and I would request all the attendees to keep their microphones off and for the session, so that we can have a smooth session. Now, I will request Elisa to give an introduction for the attendees.
A very good evening to each and every one of you present here. I, Eliza Tariq, a member of the IDG, would take the privilege of welcoming you to the 119th informal discussion group session. With us today, we have Ms. Medha Patkar, an inspirational social activist and the founder of Narmada Bachao Andolan. In 1986, ma'am established the organization Narmada Dharamgrastra Samiti, which in 1989 went on to become the Narmada Bachao Andolan. It has questioned displacement and the paradigm of non-sustainable destructive development over the last 35 years. Ma'am is also the founder and convener of the National Alliance of People's Movement, NAPM, in India. She was the representative to the World Commission on Dams, the first independent global advisory body on dam-related issues of water, power, and alternatives. She has also been a part of many battles with human and constitutional rights of farmers, workers, urban poor, and Adivasis. Ma'am has also worked with local communities to develop alternatives for energy generation, water harvesting, and education, and she created a system of residential and day schools in villages of Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, and Gujarat. She has been recognized internationally for her work. She has also won several prestigious awards in the field of social activism, including the BBC Award for Best International Campaigner, Amnesty International's Award for Human Rights Defender, and Rights Livelihood Award, which is an alternative Nobel Prize. She is still in the struggle and reconstruction work and a member of the core committee of the ongoing farmer movement. We are honored to have ma'am with us today. In this session, she will be enlightening us on the topic of roadblocks to environmental justice.
Respected Vice Chancellor Chakravarti ji, one who perseverantly pursued and brought me online from offline work, and all of you, the members of faculty as well as the students. It's wonderful to know that you all who are learning the juridical sciences are also interested in learning the environmental science and environmental justice as not just a concept, but a need of the hour. And it is also appreciable that you have already had 118 sessions, and the informal group discussions really matter a lot, because otherwise bhashan baji se kuch nahi nikalta hai. So I hope that after my presentation, although I always take longer time than given, but after my presentation, you would have very, very critical and strong questions. And that would help me to fill in the gaps. The topic is a very, very important topic and very vast topic. When you have called it environmental justice, what does it mean by it? I always say, as I have learned from none else but L.C. Jain, as an economist and a former member of Planning Commission, that human justice is above legal justice. And hence, I'm sure that you are not only occupied with the concept and the experiences of legal justice, but a human justice. And environmental justice is also linked with social justice on one hand and human justice on the other. And it is therefore necessary to understand that when we know that in this pandemic situation also, people who have died due to dearth of oxygen which comes only and only from the trees, the green cover, and not from the oxygen plants or the concentrators. They only take it out of air and fill it, and it is given to you by ventilators. But the green ventilators are the real sources of oxygen. Now, when this has happened and we have lost many of our close friends, including activists, literatures, politicians, and all, we know that we need to really protect environment. And you all know already that as the directive principles, especially Article 48, 48A, and 49, really conceive that the protection and improvement of environment and safeguarding of forests and wildlife is something that the state is duty bound to. Now, you all must be knowing that the directive principles, unfortunately, are not justiciable. I hope that not is removed, and that would bring in a basic transformation in the economy, polity, and governance of this country, and will lead to also a change in the development vision and paradigm of ours as well as the rulers. A paradigm which would not only prevent destruction, degradation, degeneration of these resources, and that should include land, water, air, forest, wildlife, minerals as well. But environment includes not just ozone layer, it also includes human beings. And hence, when we talk about environmental justice, we cannot forget environmental rights, access to the various natural resources, and also the benefits from those resources, which includes harnessing, marketing, transfer of resources, acquisition and accumulation of resources, and so on. And it also has to be linked with, on one hand, the justice in terms of the right to govern, right to decide, right to plan development with those resources, and on the other hand, right to harness, but also the distribution of benefits, where distributive justice comes into the picture. And it is to be necessarily linked to the equity, which is to be covered by the umbrella concept of justice. Equity and justice are the two values which are quoted not only in the preamble of the Constitution, but in various fundamental rights and directive principles, where you can see that reflected directly or indirectly. And hence, environmental justice, if we want to approach this concept and its operationalization at various levels within the state and the society, we have to think about all these aspects: rights, access, benefits, preservation of resources, protection from destruction, pollution, degradation, clear felling, etc., etc. And that needs to also cover the relationship between the needs and the greed. Today is the day of death anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. And he had categorically stated, not once but many times, that हमारा स्वराज इस पर निर्भर करता है कि हम उपभोग नहीं पर उपयोग की बात कितनी सोचते हैं और कितनी अमल में लाते हैं. So, my dear friends, what we want to see is this. And hence, let us start with the right-based approach. Now, if you have to think about the rights, you have to start with those who live with the natural resources. They are the riparian communities, they are the riverine communities, they are the forest dwellers, they are the cattle grazers, they are the landless laborers, all including men but also women. All those including Dalits and Adivasis, who live with the natural resources. And what about farmers? The farmers' agitation that went on in spite of the martyrdom faced by 715 farmers and laborers, cattle grazers included within the definition of farmers, as our Sanyukta Kisan Morcha has believed in. When all of these communities are the natural resource-based communities, what are their rights and also responsibilities? The rights granted with primacy to these communities who live directly on natural resources are necessarily to be asserted who have saved these resources since generations. We take the benefit of oxygen that is available because forests are still saved to the extent possible by those who do not just clear fell and sell the wood. Agricultural land is saved with the simple living and self-reliant agriculturist communities, which doesn't include only the landowners, but also the landless laborers. And when they do not get the first rights and primacy, it is certainly environmental injustice. And this has been happening with the forest dwellers since long. Forest Conservation Acts since the British days have talked about conservation, but they never granted any right except the right to graze within the forest to those communities which were looted even by the British agents. And when finally the Forest Rights Act, not just Forest Conservation Act, came into being in 2006, it spoke about, referred to the historical injustice. This kind of historical injustice has been faced by many, many natural resource-based communities, which is environmental injustice. And the reason, the roadblocks for them to get this justice really are many. First and the foremost, when they were belonging to the oral tradition, they had the real community-based governance models, which were not based on the Googleization or Gobelization. Those were based on the face-to-face, not Facebook, which is faceless. And yet, when they come with an application in whatever way written down by their first learner generation, they are denied the rights, bringing in so many roadblocks that the system creates in order to stop them from getting that first and the foremost right. And this is the experience of forest dwellers, not only in the Narmada Valley, but in the Nilgiris, in the Western Ghats, in many, many places. Even in West Bengal, the Lalgad is now a battleground because the coal, the mineral underneath is trying to be given, handed over to some corporates or state agencies, whosoever. But if the communities are not consulted, if the communities are not sought consent, and that consent, as is internationally now asserted, has to be with prior, free and fair, informed consent. Is there so much of transparency and accountability that exists till today in our system that is Googleized, that has all kinds of ways and means to communicate with the communities, but when there is no political will to really seek consent of the communities, you cannot ever seek the real consent or even participation right from the first day of planning to use any natural resource, whether it is land or mineral. And when these rights are not granted, obviously their access to their sources of livelihood is denied. And that really makes them destitute. What is poverty? These communities are rich in natural resources. These communities are rich in human power. If those natural resources, whether it is a river with the surface water flowing or the groundwater, is not accessible to the city dwellers, will they not die of thirst? If the farmers do not grow the eatables, not just cash crops, but food crops, and if that agricultural land is not saved, not only from degeneration or degradation with waterlogging, salinization, so many things, but also from the transfer from agricultural to non-agricultural sector, who will feed you and me? Let me know. And hence, when the farmers, the laborers try to save their livelihood sources and also the sources of food security or other benefits for which natural resource is the basic capital. I don't like that word, but it is a capital which is indispensable. Money you can create, but not land. And when the climate change kind of impacts come, everyone says that it is destruction of forest that is done by the Adivasis. Let us see, where do we stay? If we are staying at a place where it was a forest land before or agricultural land before, who is responsible? Wherever the Adivasis, the indigenous people are staying, there is forest saved, not where the city dwellers, even the elitist environmentalists are staying. So, my dear friends, the rights and access to resources first to be granted to those communities is something that is necessary to ensure environmental justice. Now, beyond that, when these resources are to be used, no one says don't touch wood, we say, but we say that if the forest is to be protected, it cannot be commercialization of forest or corporatization of forest. But today, when the Adivasis and the simple living natural based communities have saved whatever amount of forest, not 33% of our land is anymore covered with forest. They take the satellite images and say that even the farms with sugarcane standing are the farms where there is just a minute, where there is forest standing. No, that is a different kind of green cover. So it is necessary to understand that those who have saved the communities are many times blamed for its destruction, which is exactly the opposite. You see what is happening in Orissa today, in the village Dinkia, who saved that coastal land over generations and who were living with that land with the betel leaf cropping pattern. They are not just denied right to decide, but they are really treated with absolutely brutal lathi charging, and even the women were beaten by the police, and all their local leaders are in jail. Now, this kind of approach by the state is a roadblock to environmental justice. And when the state really is supposed to be governing this country, including the natural and human resources that are a part of Bharat Mata, that is prayed and पूजा करते हैं, लेकिन हम लोगों को सोचना चाहिए कि वो मतलब उसका लैंड, वाटर, फॉरेस्ट, मिनरल्स और यही है. अब ये जो बेनिफिट शेयरिंग है, ये benefit sharing is to be controlled and monitored. No one says that don't harness resource, don't use wood, don't use minor forest produce, but that benefit needs to come through the appropriate, sustainable and just process of harnessing. In order to do that, without the participation of local communities who know how to conserve forest better than the forest conservators who are in places and positions of the state government or the central, it is necessary that they need to be the partners and participants. Instead, what is happening today? The real roadblock today is crushing the constitutional framework. And an assault on the constitutional framework is through imposition of the wrong laws which are against sustainability, against justice, but also against the democracy. And this, the latest example is that of the amendment of Biodiversity Act. You won't believe that this act came into being after much intervention by the environmentalist, a honest environmentalist who is not just grassroots but mass root based, like Madhav Gadgil, whose report on the Western Ghats is very, very popular, but not popular amongst the statutory actors, but popular amongst the communities who are facing hell with the landslides in Western Ghats and floods in the state like Kerala, which has been a bountiful state as well. Now, with that Biodiversity Act, which came up due to much efforts by these kinds of environmentalists and many of our friends, colleagues, we all were a part of supporters group. But now that act is being changed. It is changed with a clear interest in commercialization and corporatization. Now, if we lose the biodiversity, what is it that we are talking about in the summits that are held in Paris to Copenhagen? What is it that we really look into? What is it that we get from the conventions that are signed by all our prime ministers, chief ministers, and ministers concerned? They certainly commit that they will have the zero carbon emission by 2070. What is the pathway to reach the manzil? What is happening here is even Biodiversity Act is amended so that whether it is Baba Ramdev or anyone, they would get the clear access to the biodiversity rich forests, no doubt about it, because they have not even retained the original act which has cited the United Nations Convention on Biodiversity. Instead, they are referring to some protocol, which is a protocol which emphasizes commercialization and commercial sharing of biological resources. So this kind of change in the act and every section really indicates that it will be monetization of these resources. And monetization leads to corporatization, because non-monetized communities who save the natural resources and they do not sell and purchase so easily, although some market entry is being made, even in the Adivasi, Dalits, and the natural resource-based communities, it is still within control. When anyone who comes with only money, and money, which you cannot eat or drink, but with that money they buy over not just forest, but land, water, groundwater, minerals, rivers, whatnot. And then the environmental justice is denied not only to the communities living on those natural resources, but all of us. All of us live on the pure air and potable water. And when that is destroyed, and if that will be destroyed with such kind of legislations, which will bring in not just commercialization, but also pollution, destruction that is necessarily associated with these kinds of activities. So we need to really save our rivers. What is the way out? Here is Narmada Bachao, Manav Bachao, and all our organizations symbolized. But the river Narmada is just one of the rivers which are being destroyed today. After 36 years of struggle, we have got rehabilitation for 50,000 families with 5 acres of land to 20,000 families, so on and so forth. And whatever few thousand remains, we continue the struggle. But what is happening to Narmada? The big dam, not once but many, are killing the rivers. And if that river gives the water not only to the riparian riverine communities, which are destroyed with the big dams bringing in submergence and submergence related activities such as illegal sand mining, clear felling of forests, which is necessarily associated, what happens is that the river as a source of potable water gets destroyed. And even the benefits which are promised to the dam like Sardar Sarovar, to the regions like Kutch and Saurashtra, do not reach them and the power generation also comes down, while the cost benefit analysis gets totally changed with 60,000 crores spent on one single dam, but power generation not taking place, and instead monetary monetary compensation only is granted, for which there was no need for a dam. They could have simply distributed money from Gujarat to Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra. So this kind of approach therefore needs to be reviewed. We started with the Tennessee Valley project in USA and followed that from Bhakra Nangal to Sardar Sarovar. But what is happening today? The real benefits have not come through these big dams. And USA itself has demolished 1,000 dams to make rivers flow freely, while 5 saints have laid their lives on the bank of Ganges, including Professor G.D. Agrawal and Swami Nigamananda, who fought against the illegal sand mining but could not save Yamuna since he died when he was fasting. And they were real saints, not just the saints which exploit people or bring in a tamasha of their sainthood. And yet we have not learned the lesson. Every river is getting destroyed today, and we need to really ensure that it is saved if we want environmental justice in terms of access to all of us to the river water, which flows mainly after big dams are built to the cities and industries. But what is the relationship between the industrial activity and the rivers? Every single river is polluted. You won't believe that this black color water is flowing into the tributaries of Narmada that has cut off 40 Adivasi villages from their source of water, including groundwater, which has become totally polluted. And yet no action is being taken by the government in Madhya Pradesh, which the Adivasis and all of us have been questioning. But what is the result? The result is that even organic farming cannot be taken up by the farmers within Narmada waters. The officials are not giving certificate saying if you are using Narmada water that is full of chemicals, then how can that be considered as potable? And everyone, lakhs and lakhs of families in this 1,300 kilometers long river are really living on Narmada waters for satiating thirst. So this kind of environmental destruction is denying justice, which is based on equity and fulfillment of the basic needs of the citizenry of India. Now, going beyond this, if you see, why is this happening? Why are the communities not given the primacy? Because there are the agents who really are wanting to accumulate and benefit themselves from the natural resources. You won't believe that Mukesh Ambani's Reliance has 11,000 outlets where there are agro products and dairy products. And those are existing in 7,000 towns and cities. And Mukesh Ambani's Reliance is proud of earning more than 1,000 crores per day. Who really gains and through what ways and means? Why have the farmers been committed to suicide and not committed to self-reliance? The farmers are committing suicide at least 9 per day, and that's why the farmers had to fight with our Sanyukta Kisan Morcha banner for 13 months to get the 3 corporate prone laws back. But that has not ended the matter, because they are not getting the due value for their products, which comes from the natural resources and human power, not only from the landowners, but also the landless laborers, including women in a large number. Are they all getting justice? They do not have even the minimum support price granted. Only 6% of India's population get whatever is the support price declared, and that too only for the 24 communities not 24 produces products, agro products, horticultural products, but not all. Not to the hilly millets, not to milk, not to many fruits and vegetables. And whatever MSP is declared is not even giving them 1:1.5 equation of Swaminathan Ayog based support price. So they are all losing in every agri activity where they are facing injustice. And that is leading to suicides. No other way to survive, they feel. And that cannot be treated with compensation in terms of money. If that livelihood, which is also a source of food security for all our poor women who have lost their jobs, even as domestic servants or as laborers during lockdown, they really, wait for that 5 kg, which really is enough for 8 days food, not for 1 month. And when this is the situation, that the farming is a business in losses, and there is no ease of doing business granted to the farming, which is also to be considered as business, then they have to get their due benefit as profit over expenditure. But when the bottled water gets 18 rupees for the water which they get for 55 paisa from the government, this is the huge profiteering. And this happens even in the agro products like the makai ka bhutta, जो मॉल में मिलता है 80 रुपीस में. तेल, ऑयल, अंबानी नहीं, अडानी फॉर्चून ऑयल बेचते हैं, आप यूज करते होंगे. How much do they earn with that? How much do they earn with just the flour of the wheat or makai, which is packed and sold? It is to be considered as an unjust economy, which really benefits the middlemen, which are not just the small traders, but also these huge corporates, which are multinational corporates, although their base may be in India. They work in Australia, they work in Nepal, they work in USA and UK as well. So friends, it is also necessary to protect the natural resources in order to get justice to those communities, and also to all of us who are living on the same resources from marketization, commodification, and corporatization, which has to be minimized. And for that, not only we need an MSP Act so that agriculture will be saved, but we also need that the cooperative ways of harnessing come in. When there is so much of talk about unemployment today, is it not possible to harness every kacha mal, the raw material, as agro produce, horticultural produce, milk and whatever, the forest produce, minor to mineral, within a smallest possible unit of development? It is possible. Let there be cooperatives of women. Let there be village industries and cottage industries, which is what Gandhiji had taught us to move towards Gram Swaraj. But on one hand, there is so much talk about Atmanirbhar Bharat, but there is no Atmanirbhar farmer, there is no Atmanirbhar village community, and Bharat is also not Atmanirbhar. Who is entering into this sector of environment in which agriculture is something that provides livelihood source to at least 60% of our population, which if we include even the traders directly related to the agriculture sector, not AAA, Ambanis and Adanis, but all those who are FFF, farmers and farm laborers. And there we need to change our system of not only production, but also harnessing and distribution of resources should be first guaranteed by basic need fulfillment as our concept of development. And if that kind of planning is to be done, it has to start with the smallest unit. The real roadblock is the macro and mega level assaults that comes in the form of inputs. But It takes over much more. आंवला देकर कोहला निकालना, ऐसा हम मराठी में एक proverb के द्वारा बताते हैं. तो इतना दे दो और इतना निकालो. And that is monetary input making and output gaining. And this needs to be stopped. But today they have given entry to the Microsoft. Bill Gates Foundation is an owner of 240,000 acres of land in USA itself. It has destroyed the agriculture, the traditional technology, to the self-reliance in the African countries. And now India has welcomed Bill Gates Foundation. Whether it is Bill Gates laboratory in Wuhan that brought in coronavirus or not, but this is a virus that is the most dangerous one, because its entry into agriculture sector, its entry into land records keeping. Patwari nahi, Bill Gates rakhenge land records. So this Googleization is having pros and cons. It is benefiting this dialogue. So I have no moral right to say it should be totally out, but it is also giving the full scope to the marketizers, to the investors of money to really exploit everything by controlling not just records, but also the marketing practices within themselves. And hence, it is necessary to understand that these international finances, international corporates, including the World Bank, ADB, all of them who are entering into the environmental sectors, whether related to land, water, forest, as I said, and they are giving loans, hard loans, soft loans through the World Banks, IFC, IBRD, IRBD to the governments. And the governments are entering into various contracts which you and me, even the juridical scientists, do not have any knowledge about. Because unfortunately, the Constitution has this roadblock that it does not require the state assemblies or the parliaments, any house of the parliament, to be consulted before any international agreement. So even during the pandemic, so many international agreements were signed, 9 at least, and thousands of crores of rupees are taken into India, but that has not gone into the accounts of those who have lost their livelihoods or the migrant laborers who walked a distance of 2,000 kilometers. We put in trains and vehicles, thousands and thousands of people coming from Bengal, Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, certain districts of Madhya Pradesh into Maharashtra, which we had to stop by taking to a fast at the borders. Friends, it is therefore necessary to understand that this kind of a wrong approach to deal with the natural resources is something that is doing injustice to not just the immediate communities, but all of us. Now here the state has become partners of these investors is the main roadblock. The various politicians take the situation in the urban areas. The land and water sources in urban areas are distributed in such a way that 85% of those resources go to 15% of the urban elites. You take the slum dwellers. They are living on 9% of land in Mumbai, while they are 60% of Mumbai's population. In every mega city and megalopolis, you will find the percentage of slum dwellers, it's somewhere between 20 to 40%. And how much land they get. If they are on a small piece of land in the 10 by 15 feet breadth and width of their houses, who save land? The land is occupied by the big developers who are invariably partners of the politicians. And hence, if you need to save land, not only for yourselves, but you have to save land for the appropriate use of land, even in the urban planning, where open spaces are necessary, where some green cover is necessary, where land for flowing the water and not getting waterlogged is necessary. Land is needed for the basic amenities and affordable housing for not just the slum dwellers, but up to the middle class people. But that land as a natural resource, again, part of environment, is absolutely unjustly distributed. And there the roadblock is these developers, so-called, while the real development, real building and construction work is done by our construction workers who do not get justice. And then the environmental injustice is faced not only by those workers who are considered as wrongly as unorganized sector, they are unprotected sector with no pension, no provident fund, but it also affects the others. Now, who will study and assess all these impacts? The floods in the various cities that are faced, whether it is in Chennai, whether it is in the cities of Bengal, especially in the Sundarbans, Malda, and all those areas. Why? What is the reason and causes behind? There is no environmental impact assessment done impartially. So much is talked, as I said, in the international summits, but the ground level work is either avoided totally or it is done in a very partial manner so as to promote the so-called development in favor of the monetary investors, but not in favor of those who face Amphan, who faced Oki, who faced tsunami, who faced Nisarga, all these cyclones which number not less than 10 in 5 years alone. So this is again the environmental destruction leading to environmental injustice, not only to those whose houses are demolished and they lose their total balance, which is lifelong, and then the sea is polluted, the sea is ingressed into the rivers, and all the impacts on the forest around, on the land around, everything, and the city's monetary resources also is not really fully and properly assessed. Now, for this, again, the laws are amended to promote, encourage, and give all concessions to these kinds of activities in the name of development. See the EIA, the environmental impact assessment that started coming into picture since 1994 when Kamal Nath ji was the environment minister. But that was diluted in 2006 and that is further to be diluted through EIA 2020. Now lakhs and lakhs of youngsters like you all really intervened. I salute them all. They are the Fridays for Future clubs, they are youth clubs, whatnot. But it is necessary to understand that the whole approach towards such amendments in the laws, where they are saying that even clearance to a project can be granted post facto. So let them, the investors who are outsiders, who are encroachers, who are assaulters, who are exploiters of the natural resources and the communities living on those, let them go on with their project. And then the clearance can be granted at a later stage. Is possibly acceptable? Can the impacts be assessed after the projects go ahead? This is exactly what happened in Narmada. And hence, when we fought the battle in the Supreme Court from 1994 to 2000, the judgment that we got was majority versus minority. The minority judge, Justice Bharucha, coming from Gujarat, really gave a truthful judgment as minority judgment because he heard the case for 6 full years with Prashant Bhushan and Shanti Bhushan as our advocates. And he said that this project is not even planned. There is a need to have an interdisciplinary panel first. Let them make all assessments. But who is making assessments and through what ways and means? And that is why the real benefits of Sardar Sarovar have not come true, because what Justice Bharucha said against the 2 judges, including Justice Kirpal, who has been advisor of the Coca-Cola factory, who was the Chief Justice in the Gujarat state itself. So I need not comment on that. But it is necessary to understand that even the judges really cannot give the judgment all in the favor of those who present a truthful picture. Exactly the opposite is said by the Prime Minister of this country. Narendra Damodar Das Modi ji addressed all the judges in Vigyan Bhavan on 26th of November, the Constitution Day. And imagine what he said. He said, मैं गुजरात से आता हूं तो मैं सरदार सरोवर का उदाहरण देना चाहता हूं कि यह आंदोलन जो है वही रोड ब्लॉक बनते हैं. तो आप रोड ब्लॉक्स को जानना चाहते हैं. Such statutory actors, politicians, bureaucrats, many of them really become roadblocks, but they call us as roadblockers. And he said to the judges, including Chief Justice of India, Mr. Ramanna, Chandrachud, and all of them being present, who were startled and whose faces I could see when I was sent that video to really listen to. He said that they create a roadblock in development. And he said that they have a neo-colonial attitude. So do we have neo-colonial? Or have the neo-colonial attitude? They need to gather together all the resources, whether land or river waters, accumulate those and distribute those towards the elite sections of population. This is neo-colonization, but he blamed us and he said, Andolan aisa karta hai, जैसा सरदार सरोवर के बारे में किया. And then the judges face हिचकिचाहट. Judges हिचकिचाहट महसूस करते हैं. मतलब he wanted to say that judges do not give impartial judgments when Andolan is having an impact. Friends, the World Bank appointed an international review committee with UNDP Vice President, with judge from Canada, with anthropologists from UK and ecologists from America, and they concluded that this project is a destructive project and not following the laws of the land nor the World Bank's manuals. And hence the World Bank withdrew from this project and stopped their funding in 1993 itself. See what is the reality and how is it interpreted even before the judiciary. So many times the judiciary also becomes a roadblock. When you are learning it, since 2007, when I started pleading in the High Court of Madhya Pradesh, I realized that there are many judges who are very, very sensitive and sensible and who are ready to listen to us without the black coats worn. But there are others who have a certain paradigm in their mind of development. So that also becomes a roadblock. So every pillar of democracy really acts in its own ways. And today in this country, the situation is one of fully corporatized economy and fully corporatized polity as well. And that is the real roadblock to protect environment as per the articles, and also to have the economy as per Article 39, which says that the economic development should be such that the wealth should not be concentrated in a few hands. But it is that kind of vulgar inequity that is leading to injustice, not only environmental injustice, but also educational injustice, injustice in the sector of health, injustice in the sector of housing, injustice in the sector of employment. 29 workers favored laws are withdrawn and 4 codes are imposed. How will the agriculture laborers or the forest dwellers, who are all considered as workers, fight for their rights and to save their resources? So the climate change is unavoidable if we do this kind of environmental injustice to all those who are the real saviors, who are the real protectors. And hence, when the climate change is bringing down the glaciers, when the climate change is killing people with the heat and humidity that together forms the index for climate change, that is faced in the worst manner by those who work in the open, whether it is in the today's cold wave or whether it is with the heat and the temperature rise, which has already reached up to 1.5 degree additional. It is therefore necessary to really, for environmental justice, we need to stop this. When Greta Thunberg says that in that Glasgow summit, it is all blah, blah, blah that takes place. Imagine how carefully are they listening to the leaders of the nation state. And they realize that they are making promises, signing conventions, but when they return from Paris to India, they open up the coal blocks to the private sector. Not one, but 41. How can they save India from the carbon emission, even up to 2070? And 60% of our energy is coming from thermal power. And we are more and more of energy intensive activities, from agriculture to housing sector. Every sector, and the consumerism, the lifestyle is the real roadblock. When the culture is changed towards consumerist material culture, you cannot have saving energy as your real goal. And then for that energy intensivity, which is based on a wrong choice of technology. We have options and options in every sector. How to manage water in a decentralized way, without big dams, without having the bullet trains. You can improve the transport policy for all, not for the handful of elites. And without getting the international finance, which is the flow of the capital, which again occupies the various sectors and impose their technology, which benefits their corporates. This is a vicious cycle that goes on. Friends, therefore, maybe it was Planning Commission or a Niti Aayog, we have to make the communities as the real planning units. And then only the environment will be saved. And if the environment is not used in an extravagant ways, if the lifestyles are not growing into with consumerism, and if we have the proper choice of technology and the proper unit of development planning, and if our development goal is one of equity and justice, we then only and only then can save the humanity from climate justice, and environmental justice will also, climate change and environmental justice can be ensured. So much more can be talked about, but I stop here and I would like to take your questions. Aditi, if I've taken longer time, I'm sorry for it, but do raise questions, whatever comes to your mind. I will fill in the gaps. Maybe I was a little disorganized because I just came from the program and sat here. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for the insightful session. I would request Tumshita Jha to carry forward with the procedure.
Thank you so much, ma'am. This session was indeed very insightful. As I can see, you've got quite a few questions in the chat box. I will read out them to you. The first question has been sent to us by one of our professors, Mr. Shambhu Prasad Chakrabarti, and he asks, how happy we should be with our access and benefit sharing mechanism under the Biodiversity Act. Is there any specific model which you would like to promote?
The so-called benefit sharing is going to benefit the monetary investors. And if they come in, they may claim that they will protect biodiversity, which is being destroyed. But as I said, forest is protected only in the regions and areas where Adivasis, the simple living communities, are living. If the market has made an entry into forest, that is because the governments are permitting that and not controlling their entry. And so many examples I can give you. The Forest Rights Act, for example, also can affect negatively the forest. If individualization is brought into the indigenous communities, governance and community level decision making and activities. And this is happening because the community level rights that are also to be granted, Samuhik Vana Adhikar, that are also to be granted under the same act, Forest Rights Act of 2006, that is not granted so easily by any state government. they are also concentrating on giving the rights to the individual Adivasis. That is not proper. If the community level rights are granted and the community is considered as the first unit for development planning, that would be different. But this change in the Biodiversity Act, all junior to senior environmentalists are now opposing it, because everyone knows that this is again going to privatize the use of the forest resources with biodiversity, which is a must. We are losing thousands of species which perform a great role in every ecosystem, whether it is a river valley, whether it is a coastal region with the fish species, the fish workers are affected, whether it is the forest dwellers who are affected with the biodiversity getting lost, from which they were getting medicines to food crops and horticultural produce, etc., and living on the minor produce, which were sold, but to a very limited extent. Now, all this is likely to be lost if the benefit sharing is giving entry to the private players who will not be controlled by the politicians or the bureaucrats, when they would become their partners. And I'm told that Baba Ramdev's 21 or whatever number of companies that he has are targeting these kinds of biodiversity regions in the name of their research, which the biodiversity funds and committees will give them the permission for, and also to harness those resources, and that will be very, very risky.
Ma'am, sir is conveying his regards to you for answering that question. He also has a follow-up question to ask. He says that why do you think that the Protection of Traditional Knowledge Bill failed?
See, the traditional knowledge, which is a codified traditional knowledge, or whatever various categorization of traditional knowledge comes in, if that traditional knowledge belonging to the communities living there on the ground is respected, then whether it is of fishing or using the forest produce, the communities will get the first primacy. But if that is again to promote the so-called researchers who are really marketeers, then that will be different. Now, I don't know exactly what but certainly the NGT to environmentalists, the National Green Tribunal to the individual environmentalists, and various environmentalist organizations are wanting the traditional knowledge to be saved, but the state, in the name of protecting traditional knowledge and respecting that knowledge, if they give an entry to certain organizations as middlemen and institutions who will not really have the traditional ways of protecting that knowledge, or based on that knowledge protecting the natural resources, then it will be something exactly contrary. So it is necessary nowadays, in the present situation, to carefully assess every amendment, every law, word by word. And that's why farmers said that we don't want an in-between amendment to those three laws. We want three laws to be repealed. But even after that, the Adanis and Ambanis have built and are building silos for storing food crops, which are no more considered as which were not to be considered as essential commodities, and they are all preparing themselves to join hands with Walmart kind of company and Bill Gates Foundation and so on. I can't describe everything here, but so many things are happening behind the curtain, and hence the real vested interests need to be identified, without which we cannot really assess the impacts of the various laws and amendments into laws. And we have to see that in the constitutional framework, which itself is ruled out directly or indirectly.
Thank you so much, ma'am. The next question would be asked by Samad Sansar. He is a member of our committee. He's also a fourth-year student in our college.
Good evening, ma'am. Hope I'm audible. Thank you, ma'am, for your insightful address. So, during your address, you discussed how different judges have different notions. Like some would give you patient hearing, but some would, won't be as kind as others. So, but my question related to the role of judiciary in shaping our environmental jurisprudence in general. Has the judiciary, particularly the Supreme Court, really been effective in shaping a sustainable model through various decisions of theirs?
Don't make me commit contempt of court. But I would say that you all know there are judges and judges. They are all human beings. No one is holier than cow. And they have their own backgrounds, their own perspectives, and their own belief in the paradigm that they choose as the real symbol of progress, indicator of development, and so on. And hence we have had many different examples. For example, I'll tell you, when I was pleading the case on the canal affected regions and people in the Narmada Valley, the Justice A.K. Patnaik, and I've seen that judges coming from Oriya, with one or two exceptions, Orissa, really are more sensitive to the natural resource protection. I can't make that general comment so easily, but I'm just making the prima facie impression. And he really looked into that in a very, very detailed way and granted a stay order to me, to us, based on the fact that the Gram Sabhas were not consulted, because our whole of the area where the canals are coming from 2-3 mega dams into the areas affected by Sardar Sarovar and others, the upstream dams. There are 30 large dams, 135 medium dams in the Narmada Valley, let me tell you. And this is the Pesa region, the Adivasi scheduled tribe areas. So they need to be consulted, but that was not happening. So he gave a stay order. And then afterwards, when the stay order were vacated also, he gave very good judgment, against which the state government approached Supreme Court, and we had to plead the case there also. We got some judgment which gave raise in the compensation to the canal affected. But the real issue was that without command area development, which means wherever the irrigation is to flow, there need to be taken up so many activities so that there would be no waterlogging, there would be no salinization, there would be no breaches in the canal, as it is happening in Kutch, as it is happening in Gujarat with the Sardar Sarovar canals. And here the upstream dams, canals were to affect the farmers in different ways, although there would be benefits also. No one is saying that there is no benefit. But without command area development to push the canal construction, we questioned it, challenged it. The chief engineers and everyone was called by Justice Patnaik to the court. And he gave a clearance, finally, withdrawing the stay order. Because some lawyers insisted that Ram Sabha's consent is not necessary, because the Madhya Pradesh Panchayati Raj Act has not incorporated the PESA Act by having their own rules. It is 1 month ago that Shivraj Singh Chauhan, the chief minister, is declaring that now PESA Act would be applicable in Madhya Pradesh. Imagine, 1996 Act not yet fully implemented. And such a situation, if I were in the judge's position, I would have really passed strong deterrent action to be taken against the state government itself. But that much the judges cannot go easily, and hence the stay order was withdrawn, and without the complete command area development, but with the conditional directives, that was allowed. And this construction now is creating problems everywhere. So the judges also have their own limitations, but at least the judges who are sensitive to these issues, whether it is displacement, whether it is destruction of the resources, even in illegal sand mining, I pleaded the case, I got the stay order, but we have to go and stop the vehicles, stop the tractors, the Oakland machines, everything against the judgment of the Supreme Court of 27 February 2012, judgments of the NGT of 2013, and their directives to all chief secretaries, etc., etc. It really takes hell of efforts. So the role and the responsibility that you and me have to play, including the communities, is something that really bring in the effect of the judgments. And in order to get the real just judgments, फैसला नहीं न्याय चाहिए, ये हमारा नारा रहा है. So if we don't want just judgments but we need justice, we have to make much effort, not only in data collection, but also mass action has to take place outside. When the farmers were camping and having such a perseverant and strongly mass-based agitation, the Supreme Court, even Mr. Bobde, imagine, had to give a stay to the 3 laws implementation. That was an achievement. But the farmers said that like Gandhiji did it during Champaran Satyagraha, or Shahid-e-Azam Bhagat Singh did it when he was, hanged, that no question of going to judges and the judiciary, because it is a political issue and we want political will and political justice through that. So it is also necessary to understand that कोर्ट की पैड़ी कब चढ़नी है और कोर्ट में कब नहीं जाना है, ये भी एक प्रॉपर डिसीजन होता है. नर्मदा आंदोलन ने बहुत सारे कोर्ट केसेस से बहुत सारा न्याय लिया, अधिकार लिए, लेकिन हम लोगों ने हर ऑर्डर के इम्प्लीमेंटेशन के लिए बहुत मास एक्शन से स्ट्रगल करने के सिवाय कुछ नहीं मिलता है, यही अनुभव लिया. तो ये दोनों बाजू होता है. एंड जजेस के बारे में जुडिशियल एकेडमीज हैं, वहां हमको बुलाते हैं, हम बात रखते हैं, और कभी कभी ये लगता है कि उसका भी इम्पैक्ट होता है. लेकिन जो पहले होता था, when Justice P.N. Bhagwati was there or Justice V.R. Krishna Iyer was there, they used to appoint commissions and ask them to go down to earth. अभी क्या है, everything is what's happening, what's up and what's down जो है वो कोई देखता ही नहीं है. तो जजेस को भी इस प्रकार से अप्रोच लेना ये नहीं होता है. दूसरी बात ये होती है कि जजेस गेट आफ्टर देयर रिटायरमेंट सर्टेन पोजीशंस, whether it is in the Rajya Sabha or in the National Human Rights Commission. They have every right to do that, but there should be some monitoring and control over these things also. Appointment of judges to appointment of retired judges. This whole continuum needs to be looked into, and there should be a discussion in the public domain on this issue, which takes place sometimes, but not to the extent possible and necessary.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, you spoke about Justice A.K. Patnaik. He was there for one of our IDG sessions, online sessions only, 114th IDG session.
Once when I was pleading the case, the then Advocate General of Madhya Pradesh complained that, my lord, you are giving extra time to Narmada Bachao Andolan. Because I had to plead with all external sources and internal sources. I had to study the case law, and I'm not a lawyer by degree, but I am an advocate for justice, that's all. So I had to really plead in a very detailed way, and we had so much to say, because we have the ground level faces of people, the situation, etc. in our eyes. And hence it was happening. And he never really, curtailed the chance to really plead and give all, not only examples, but even experiences, and also the data presentations. And he told me that, madam, you're using external aids more than the internal aids. I said, sir, because I believe, my lord, sir, I believe that these external aids are more truthful and honestly bringing up the data than the official documents which are considered as internal aids. And they are not external to this world or to the citizenry of India. And hence, I believe that judiciary must take those also at equal par. And he appreciated that. But otherwise, the Advocate General was complaining, and he said that, Mr. Advocate General, you bring in other lawyers before me who would also plead so passionately about the issue of displacement and rehabilitation. Then only I will curtail the time and space given to these activist lawyers, activist leaders. So it was very necessary. He also said once that when a technical mistake was there, I had not made an application for withdrawal or stay of the certain government order while I was challenging that. And the same Advocate General came in and he said, no, 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 that cannot be done. There is no application to that effect. And I really made my colleague run out of the room and type an application and bring it. And meanwhile, I went on pleading. And he said, finally, Mr. Advocate General, if there was someone like Reliance in front of you, you could have complained this, but not otherwise. So Justice Patnaik was a judge who also watched the video of arrest of the women who had taken satyagraha on the government farmland because they were not giving the land to the Adivasis. And we were arrested at night and we were thrown into jail. And when I came out after fast, I stood before the Chief Justice Patnaik, and he really watched the video and he granted 10,000 rupees to us rather than saying that you had encroached upon the government land. So there are ways and means through which the judges can get the truth, into their hands and then take a position. But that again depends on their sensitivity and their faith in the constitutional values and human rights.
Ma'am, the next question has been sent to us by Aliza. She asks, Ma'am, the Kane Betwa River Linking Project got the approval of Cabinet recently. What is your opinion on such ecologically sensitive projects where, on one side, it would be immensely beneficial in providing irrigation or drinking water, and on the other hand, has been criticized for posing grave threat to aquatic and terrestrial biodiversity?
Interlinking of rivers, we do not approve as the real solution to the water issues. Even today, wherever there are interstate conflicts over rivers, whether it is Krishna, Kaveri, Narmada, Godavari, or even the Periyar, you know that there is no people-to-people dialogue, and all the politicians to the cine actors get into the issue, as it is happening today with the Meke Datu project on Kaveri, which would really nail the last hit onto the Kaveri's river basin. And yet the politicians are very much in it. But all Dalit Adivasi organizations are questioning, and I have joined them. It is necessary to understand that when this kind of inter-river basin transfer takes place, it has its own problems and issues. Internationally, inter-river basin transfer of waters through the damming of the river is considered as unscientific and ecologically destructive. That is one thing, because then you have to have a cumulative impact assessment. As I said, even the simple impact assessment of a single project does not take place impartially and honestly. I can give you a number of examples, whether it was Jindal's project in the district of Raigad, on the river Kelo in Chhattisgarh, or others in Uttarakhand, where the public hearings also did not take place with all honesty and scientificity and legal processes. But so cumulative impact assessment would be still more difficult to attain. it is also necessary to understand that the river basin is the ecosystem within which the land, water, forest, even the minerals like sand, which is the water containing mineral. And that's why Supreme Court says that no sand can be extracted without clearance. But that is not happening. It is necessary to understand that all these parts and parcels of that ecosystem need to be taken into consideration, and planning is to be done. Instead, the interlinking of rivers, it is a huge project, and that is believed to be taking the water from the from supply to deficit areas, and which was what the former president Kalam Sahab believed in. I met Kalam Sahab twice with Kuldeep Nair ji, Rajendra Sachar ji, then Ram Swami Iyer, who happened to be the Secretary of Water Resource Ministry many times, L.C. Jain Sahab, and all of us tried to tell him that it is not so easy to say that Ganges have extra water and that needs to be brought to Kaveri. And look what has happened today, that the Brahmaputra, which is linked to Ganges, is stopped by the China in the upstream itself. And the dam at the Greater Mode, as was planned already, but that was not taken into consideration. And when the Ganges, the valley, which is the real food producing region in this country, it is necessary to understand that the water of that river will be extra as available during the flood time. But that whole plan of interlinking of rivers would not even control flood as it is claimed. It would only take care of 1/5 of the flood waters. And all this assessment has already taken place. And this project, on the other hand, will not be without dams. Just the first Ken Betwa project between Madhya Pradesh and Uttar Pradesh, which Prime Minister recently inaugurated, in spite of huge protests going on, without taking care of the displaced and deprived populations, and without taking care of the environmental impacts and so on. It is believed that it is a link, means on the map, you can draw a line from one river to another. No, it is not that. 6 dams are included in one single link, which is considered as the first link in Betwa project. And so many assessments and analysis has already taken place, etc. And so Rahul Gandhi, as a young, political activist, with the youngsters around him, probably gave him all the data, briefing and analysis, and he opposed interlinking of rivers. That was appreciable. But they have not again taken keen interest to really stop certain links which are going on, like the Polavaram, for example. 276 villages are to be affected by Polavaram. It includes not just Andhra Pradesh, but Orissa also. Interstate conflict is going on, so on and so forth. And how much will it cost? It was then when Suresh Prabhu was the Water Resource Minister. He had called me and Rajendra Singh and others, and I had really appreciated the analysis that we put forward. That time it was 5,60,000 crores project. Today it would be 10 to 15 lakh crores project. And where will the money come from? When there is no money to take care of the unemployment and the impact of the pandemic and health services and educational inputs, etc., it is necessary to understand this money again will come from the corporates, who would divert the water first to their industrial estates and to the big cities, and they will take over the rivers, not only the flood waters. So it is necessary that this kind of interstate conflict, intra-river basin transfer, huge investment from money to take over the rivers and the related benefits of the citizenry at large and riparian communities with primacy, all of that is unnecessary. What is really necessary is to have an intra-river basin water management with land and forest green cover as the related resources. And this is said time and again by even international experts, but it is not happening because there are many vested interests who want such mega projects and not go to the micro level, decentralized ways of developing or harnessing resources.
Thank you so much, ma'am. The next question would be asked by Ujwala Singh. She is a member of our committee. She is in her first year.
Good evening, ma'am. Ma'am, I think we all know that there is an evident lack of awareness amongst the general public, which often leads to inaction towards environmental justice. So, ma'am, what, according to you, are steps that can be taken to remedy this?
We are taking to struggle and reconstruction both. We have to really start with the children and youngsters, our Adivasi children in Jeevan Shala. I wish you were with us on 26th of January. Such small kids also walked and climbed the hills and the mountain ranges during the morning, rally, Prabhat Feri, and they play and they put forth. But we really create awareness amongst them through these Jeevan Shalas. We call it Jeevan Shala because we want them to remain linked with their natural ecosystem and their cultural environment also. It is necessary this to happen in all schools. But even where there are cup clubs and all, if it is an elitist approach, it is a different kind of educational exercises. Whatever ways we have to reach out to children, we have to reach out to youngsters. You all have to really understand that when many youngsters are fighting climate change, impressed by Disha Ravi and others and so on, and also ready to take courageous positions and face the related oppressive measures of the state, it is also necessary to understand that we all have to work in our own environment, right from the family to community, our colleagues, our students groups. If we can really discuss many issues and take position on how much electricity should be used, how much of Googleization, how can we control or minimize consumers' attitude, etc., and also stand up and fight wherever there is environmental, social, political injustice. That is necessary. It is also necessary to organize women who are more perseverant. जो जीवटता महिलाओं में होती है वो पुरुषों में नहीं होती है. Although farmers of Punjab, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Rajasthan have proved otherwise also, I agree. But in most of the movements, people's movements, we have seen that it is the women's force that really matters a lot. And hence it is necessary to really have the women and youth at the forefront. We have to use a lot of material. We have to use all ways and means because the mainstream media is giving a very different picture. You open the WhatsApp, which is also a corporate handle in our hands. I think all this we must really side along and really live a different life. But today we are using the thorn to prick up thorn with these all gadgets. But certainly we have to be limited in these exercises. Because when we open the WhatsApp, so many advertisements, how to really, delete that. I not that techno-savvy. I don't even understand and I get irritated many times. It's not just irritation. It is the impact of all these market publicity and campaigns that is affecting all of us, all our communities, all the citizenry. And it is not just farmers committing suicide, but the inequity, vulgar inequity, is affecting in such a way that on one hand you are told that 1,53,000 workers have committed suicide during 1 year of pandemic. But on the other hand, the employment is snatched away, retrenchment is taking place, contract labor is coming in, so many things that our trade union is fighting the battles with. So it is necessary that we take up any sector and any community, workers, farmers, laborers, women, youth, there we must make inputs to convince them of our paradigm. And legal and mass struggle both need to go simultaneously as a part of people's movements. And also, you know, having an impact on the electoral campaigns to bring in the some agenda. Like I just went to Chandigarh and Ludhiana. There is a Satluj Bachao campaign because Satluj is fully polluted and it is causing cancer and whatnot. There are cancer trains running, and that is because of the dyeing industry. You may be using the colored woolen blankets. Those are coming from Ludhiana, and those dyes are killing the potability of the river. But then 30 organizations have come together and presented their green manifesto. And I have put it on my Facebook page through my colleagues. I don't handle Facebook page. I don't see the face of it, but they put it everything. So you can see that maybe. But it is necessary that the electoral campaigns must have the right kind of agenda related to farmers, workers, environment as well. All these kinds of efforts are a must. We cannot have one front strategy. We have to have multiple front strategy. We all are falling much short of the requirement. But whatever we do, the Narmada that we fought led to World Commission on Dams. That has, its report is used as a classical document for curriculum in many countries. And it also led to appointment of a panel, inspection panel in the World Bank. You can see it on the World Bank. They are fighting the battles with the World Bank management, invite us sometimes to take their side. And they stop the funds for the Amravati city kind of project in Andhra Pradesh or the Tata Mundra project in Kutch of Gujarat and so on, because that is now a channel at least to complain to the World Bank about the impacts of World Bank funded projects. Otherwise, these projects were saying that there is no need to follow laws of the land when World Bank funds the project. How can it be? We are a sovereign country, a nation state. So that went to the US Supreme Court. My former colleague has taken up that battle and they won the battle to the Italian lawyers group, but it has now gone in appeal to further the judiciary. So there's a long perseverant battles which need to be taken up even on these international issues. So it is local to global and in the struggle as well. And we have to also take up the constructive works because we've established a small microhydel project, for example. You might have seen the film Swadesh, which was on our project. And it was with the Shramadhan, with the Keralite youngster who was expert in microhydel projects. And he really did a wonderful job with 9 months Shramadhan. And we built that project. And the survey came out to be wrong, which was done by the official engineers and surveyors. And the land the project stood got submerged. Now, who was to be blamed? But that one project also could have an impact, and people felt that in their own community in the Satpura mountain ranges from where the Narmada flows, there can be such projects. But this is possibility in all states, including Kerala, where the Kerala Shastra Sahitya Parishad kind of organization took up that issue. But this is still not followed. And still people are going for mega projects. So we want to establish certain demonstrative effects with the alternatives that we want to propose. Without that, it is not possible. But one organization or one group cannot do everything. So it has to be an alliance amongst the various organizations, some who are raising the questions through struggle, some who are raising the questions through legal action, some who are raising the questions by introducing an alternative technological model, and so on. So it's a long, long way to go. There are many irreversible damages that have happened, and irreversible changes in the economy and polity are also taking place, and that has all impact of the money and market, the capitalist model against the socialist model, which really gives primacy to society, and within society to the first unit as community. And simplicity, self-reliance, and equity have to be our values in our own lives as well as in our work life. And how to achieve that? With you all joining us, it can be achieved, not otherwise.
Ma'am, before proceeding with the next question, I would like to ask you how many questions would you like to take more?
One or two maybe. It's giving me a good chance to fill in the gaps, as I said.
Thank you so much, ma'am. The next question has been sent to us by Karishma, and she asks, what are the cost barriers in achieving environmental justice?
Costs are not just financial, but the social costs need to be paid and political costs. If you raise the questions, you can be in jail, but I don't want to scare all of you. But it is necessary that you raise it with courage and commitment. And it is also the financial costs. I don't know. Movements like us do not accept foreign funds, do not get big funds. So we always suffer a lot, even in running our Jivan. But I think that really has created a culture of commitment. And if we have huge funds, we would have been established NGOs and would not dare question anything that would make the state actors, rulers angry and stop the funding and so on. So it is necessary that those of you youngsters who want to join the movements and who want to take up the real transformative parivartankari agenda, you have to bear the cost in a way. But I think even if you your career, so-called career, gets affected. What is career? If you have satisfaction in your work, that is career. You can't get a salary of a judge and you can't get a salary of or the earnings as an advocate, but you can be the real advocate for environmental, social, political justice. And if that gives you satisfaction, I don't think you will feel that, oh, I am paying a big cost, I'm sacrificing, and so on. I think there is no cost assessments. I don't think is the first priority in our decision making process. First indicator in our decision making process. Money is what is money. I don't know. I mean, but we are paying the cost in a way because the students, after they come out of the urban institutions and wanting to have their career, join NGOs. So this NGOization is really affecting the people's movements today. The kind of commitment that we want, that you will work day and night and you will really feel for those who are not rehabilitated or who are facing hell or who are facing the state oppression or corporate exploitation in the mills and industries, all the slum dwellers who are not having a shelter for their small children. I mean, वो जो दर्द है वो लेकर जो लोग आना चाहते हैं मूवमेंट्स में, we welcome them.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Moving on to the last question of the session. It would be asked by Dipanshu Agarwal himself. He is a fourth-year student in our college. Dipanshu, you may ask.
Good evening, ma'am. Thank you for the insightful talk. Ma'am, I have one question. So there is a documentary on Hotstar which is funded by London School of Economics, and it is based on a research conducted by economist couple, so Aminata Nayyar, who is very well known. And the documentary suggests that tribals who have been displaced from Narmada to urban places are now better off necessary because they are ahead in the ownership of land, consumer durables, and they have improved their access to electricity and basic facilities like schools, hospitals, irrigation. So, in the documentary, through empirical interviews, they say that living standards have improved. So, what is your opinion regarding that? And ma'am, I have another question which is slightly based different from topic. Besides your exemplary work in this area, you also contested 2014 Lok Sabha elections from a political party ticket. So, I wanted to know about your experience as a politician and what compelled you to quit the party as well as politics altogether. Thank you, ma'am.
That was a mispatch in my life. I was again and again pressurized and convinced, and that was the time when so many senior social activists joined Aam Aadmi Party. But when we looked at the party and its functioning from a closer distance, we could not approve it. All the such activists left the party. Those who were keen on seeking change through political positions and were convinced that they can bring in some change, remained in the party, and I don't blame them. There was no need to have a conflict between Anna Hazare and Arvind Kejriwal. But the way parties function, being media savvy and selection of their candidates, which Prashant Bhushan and Yogendra Yadav also objected to, and all of that, we did not think that we could progress in our own on our own path to our own manzil through that organization, and hence we left it. And I feel very strongly that it is the non-party movements politics that really brings in better results in many situations of injustice. Now, there are other changes which can be brought through the electoral politics, but in most of these situations, the electoral politics require compromises, which we cannot agree with. So it's one's own choice, that's all. The first question, there are certain documentaries and there are certain research reports brought by these governments through their own selected researchers. Like one research was on the Adivasis rehabilitated in Gujarat. They have not said a word about how did they get even that level of rehabilitation. It was only because they all struggled with us, not otherwise. We were arrested in thousands at the dam site, and so many oppressive measures were taken. But it was when we got hold of even the World Bank that was then funding the project, and their missions that came to the valley really learned much by hearing us, by us challenging them, and so on, going to jail sometimes because of that. But then the World Bank and the United States Congress committees heard us, so on and so forth. And so much of international activity without becoming international, we could manage to really take this battle at that level. And that's why Gujarat had to do something for their own austies. But even today, there are many issues that they are facing. There are water issues with no supply at certain resettlement sites. There are many who have not got their due rehabilitation benefits and so on. And they have supposed to be getting irrigated lands. Many have got unirrigated lands. There are hundreds and hundreds of families who now are compelled to go and work as laborers in other districts of Gujarat, and so on. Now that is not reported by the researchers. And so they have their own indicators, whether you have a cycle, whether you have a TV, whether you have a pakka house now. Yes, but even that mitti ka ghar, आज हमारे यहाँ बड़े बड़े महल बन गए हैं resettlement sites में, in the plain areas of Madhya Pradesh where I am today. But they also now remember their mud jointed houses in this cold wave. Because of many these changes and transformations, there are pros and cons of what they have gained and what they have lost. Their sons and daughters have become laborers, migrant laborers. They were never migrating from the Narmada Valley because they had their self-sufficient or self-reliant, not sufficient, but self-reliant ecosystem around them, with the forest land, forest produce, fuel, with the wood, river waters, etc. That was hard life, no doubt about it. Not a hand pump. But if hand pump doesn't work for 50 days and there is no one coming to repair, they think of the mother river Narmada. So there are both sides, and whatever is gained is through the struggle that has completed 36 years. So the legal actions, Gujarat was being pleaded by Fali Nariman, who left the brief when Gujarat riots took place. And he was always a strong advocate in favor of the displaced people. When we brought out that 43 resettlement sites had water logging as a serious problem, he asked the officials in front of the judges that, is this true? And he said, if that is true, I will not plead with the false claims of the government officials, my lord. So you can pass directives. I will appreciate that. This was Fali Nariman. All advocates are not of such sensitive, courageous, and committed attitudes. So the researchers also, there are researchers and researchers, So excluding all of us, they might have said that state government has done this much. I can tell you what trouble we have with even the ousties of Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh who have resettled in Gujarat, about 6,000 and more. What are they facing, and what is it that is compelling them to come back to their villages or live on both sides, because they cannot earn enough from that land in that cash-based economy. So non-monetized economy, they have had to leave, and they have gone into monetized economy, but they are not getting that much of this thing. But some are well settled, some are not. This is the picture after 36 years of struggle. But certainly we have gained much more than any dam or any project in the world. 50,000 families and so on. But how much of struggle? I can't describe that in such a short time. So thank you so much, Toshita. I think we have finished, right?
Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, our VC sir, Vice Chancellor sir, is there on the call itself. Now, I would like to invite sir for saying a few words before moving on to the vote of thanks.
It is our pleasure that you interacted and gave a lecture which I think they will remember rest of their life. And I wish to share of my first days of teaching. When I joined teaching in the 80s, I had been asked by my principal to teach a paper, Principles of Legislation, where I referred that started Narmada Andolon. I referred in our legislation where we taught from individualism to Marxism, and one letter of Karl Marx in 1838 on Prussia. There was a law passed by Prussia ruler. Cutting of trees would be a capital offense, and by that 15,000 people being hanged in Prussia. And Marx wrote that this law was passed to supply the wood in England because of industrial revolution that time. They need these forest products. So I refer that the laws, who makes the law? What are the objectives behind law? And almost 200 years still now, from your social, political, economics, legislative surgery, which you have made before us, still continuing. Previously it was in a naked way, now in indirect, latent way it is going on. So what role you think that students or teachers can take part, or may form an attitude of the people in the country to combat this exploitation and also atrocities through in the name of change? Laws are actually brutal in its latent form.
Yes, sir, when we fought the battle in Singur and Nandigram, we know how the simple environmental judgment is not made, which has its own association with the social impacts of displacement and others. So in your state also, we have had very varied experiences of the politicians to judiciary. And that's why I think Kolkata is a place where we know that sensitivity is now created. But still new challenges are raised by the recent decisions of the state government, which also we may have to fight out.
Really, we enjoyed it.
Thank you, sir. Now I would like to invite Tushmi to deliver the vote of thanks.
Now, as the member of the IDG, I, Tushmi Udyalat, take this opportunity to thank you, Medha ma'am, for joining us in these extremely tough times during the pandemic. I personally learnt about you in my 8th grade via my Hindi textbook, which said Kamal Bachcho ki Kamal Kathaएं, and on your journey and your struggle and how that has been. And interacting with you today has been all the more thought-provoking and insightful. So I'm sure that the viewers have also taken a lot out of this session and have grasped your valuable stance on the nuances of environmental justice. On behalf of IDG, we hope that your family stays safe and in good health during these times. I would also like to thank our Vice Chancellor, sir, for joining us today, to all the faculty members, committee members, and participants who paved way for an informal conversation to flow from Medha ma'am to us eloquently by raising such intriguing questions. Thank you once again, and thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Carry on and come to us sometime. Work in
Ciao, ma'am.
people's
It will be our honor.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, ma'am.
Surely. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you.
कलकत्ता आऊंगी मैं अभी फरवरी में, तब मिलेंगे.
Looking forward to it, ma'am.